Hey guys, back with another video. I know it's been a super long time since I have provided any content, but I have been interacting with a lot of you guys that have been commenting on the videos that I do have on my channel. So I really appreciate all the comments and the questions that people have about raising ducks. And but anyway, it has been a long time since I shot a video, and I thought I would do a video on hatching duck eggs. Now, my ducks come from either a duck nursery where I get the ducklings, or they come from me purchasing adult ducks locally. I've never actually gone through the process of hatching my own ducklings from eggs. So this is going to be a learning experience for both me and you, and I'm hoping for the best. So the first part of this video, I'm going to talk about the materials that you're going to need to hatch your ducks. Then we're going to go into actually watching the incubation of the duck eggs through the 28-day period and the hatching of the ducklings. I'm going to have a follow-up video regarding taking care of ducklings in the way that I do it. And then I might have a final video on acclimating the ducklings to the duck yard. So that's my plan. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is the materials that you're going to need for hatching your own duck eggs. So first and foremost, you're going to need an incubator. And I know there's lots of different incubators that are out there online. And I did some research on the different types of incubators. They can range anywhere from $20 all the way up to pretty expensive incubators. I went with a mid-range incubator that had a lot of good reviews on Amazon. And it had, and it's this one right here. It's called the Brinsea Mini 2 Advanced. So Brinsea has been making egg incubators for a good amount of time. So they do have some experience with making these machines. They have a good customer service, a good quality service. You know who the company is. It comes with a good warranty, 3 years. And there's a couple things about this incubator, other than those things I just talked about, which is why I chose it. First and foremost, there are two things that are really, really important for an incubator. One is that it has the ability to give you consistent temperatures. And the other is that it is relatively easy to do in terms of working with your eggs and reducing the amount of handling that you need to have with them. The less you mess around with your eggs during the incubation period, the better off your eggs are going to be. So first and foremost, from all the reviews that I've read about this particular model, because it's so compact, because it's so small, and because it has such a good thermostat and a good heater element inside of it, it has a pretty good rock solid, consistent temperature readings throughout the incubation. People have talked about the fact that every single day when they come to take a look at their incubator, the temperature is always the same, very little fluctuation. Most incubators that have the capacity to do that have some kind of insulation that they do to be able to keep that temperature consistent. This doesn't have that, which is phenomenal. I think the way that it gets around that is that one, it actually raises the incubator off the ground, so you don't have to worry about the surface that the incubator is sitting on sucking up temperature and reducing the temperature of the eggs. So it actually is on its own little platform. The other thing, because it's compact, there is not a lot of air that it needs to heat up. So it's not always fighting with this engine to constantly heat the air up while it's losing air at the same time. So not only is it nice to be compact because you don't have to have a lot of footprint to be able to store it and be able to use it, but it also allows it to have some pretty rock solid temperatures. The other thing about the incubator that's really nice is that you can actually keep the humidity up in the way that you add the water, and you never have to open up the incubation chamber. So again, it's very important when you're choosing an incubator that you find something that's easy to use and reduces the amount of effort that you spend on handling the eggs. The less you mess with the eggs, the better your success rate is going to be. So this has the capacity to actually add water outside the chamber, so you never have to open up the chamber to add the water, which I think is really cool. The third thing about this incubator, which is really nice, is that unlike chicken eggs, duck eggs have to do something called cooling off, where you actually cool down your egg on a daily basis. And it's supposed to naturally imitate what a duck does when it's incubating its own eggs. So when it's incubating its eggs, eventually every day it needs to get up, it needs to go eat, it needs to go to the bathroom, and then it comes back again. So every single day when eggs are being incubated by a duck, there is a process where they cool down and then they come back up in temperature. And not a lot of incubators have the ability for you to cool them down. Most people, what they need to do is pull the eggs out of the incubator, spritz them with water, and what that does is it cools it down, and then they throw it back in their incubator again. Again, a lot of handling, and an incubator, just by its very nature, is high temperature, high humidity. Those things are really, really important for bacteria growth. And so what you want to do is reduce the chances of introducing bacteria into your incubator, because if you do that, you could potentially reduce your success rate with your hatching. So again, less handling, less bacteria, better success rate. So that's another thing that I really like about this incubator. So those are the three things: good consistent temperature, small footprint, easy to incubate your eggs, and it has a cooling off period, automated period in it. Okay, so that's the incubator. Now, I do want to say that I have decided that I am going to test how good this incubator is at actually showing me the temperature and what the humidity is inside. If there's one knock about this particular incubator, is that it doesn't allow you to fine tune the humidity. You basically add the water to a certain level and the humidity goes up to a certain level, and that's what it's at. There's no way for you to know what the humidity is, and there's no way for you to finally adjust the humidity. Brinsea does have models that are much more expensive where you can actually do that, but this model doesn't have the ability to do that. So what I wanted to do was have the ability to test and verify the temperature and the humidity inside the chamber. So I decided to use one of these. Okay, so this is called a sensor push. It's a Bluetooth sensor which has the ability to monitor and record both temperature and humidity and send that readings to your phone through Bluetooth and do tracking and logging and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to have a lot of data that's going to let me know what is actually going on inside the chamber itself and whether or not the incubator is reporting the correct data back to me. So I'm going to be doing that and giving you guys that data as well with this particular incubator. All right, so that's the actual incubator. Again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me. The next thing I want to talk about is the eggs. So eggs obviously are the most important material that you're going to need for hatching ducks. You need to be extremely concerned about where you're getting your duck eggs from. Now, you can get them from a variety of different sources. You can get them from your own ducks. You can get them from a local farmer, or you can also order them online, which is what I've done. So when you order duck eggs online, you want to make sure that you do some research into the supplier, find out where their ducks actually came from. These particular duck eggs came from ducks that originated from Holder-Reed Farms, which is a great duck nursery, which is where I would get all my silver apple yards from. These are supposedly come from show quality ducks, and they indicate that their ducks have a very high fertility rate with their eggs. It's at 100%. So that should mean that every single one of these eggs that I have should be fertile. I will tell you that duck eggs are notoriously hard to hatch, and you get a success rate anywhere between 50 to 70%. And that's if you're actually good at what you're doing. So you should expect that regardless of the amount of eggs that you're going to try to hatch, there's going to be a certain amount of them that are just going to fail. So the thing that you want to start off with is at least getting good duck eggs from a good source. Packaging is very important, making sure that they do a good job with packaging so that your eggs don't crack during shipment. And the breed that I'm going to be hatching is called the Welsh Harlequin. The Welsh Harlequin duck is a breed that I've been doing a lot of research on. As you guys know, I'm very big with silver appleyard ducks. That's an English breed. Both the silver appleyard and the Welsh Harlequin are considered to be great backyard ducks for beginner duck owners. The difference between the appleyard and the Welsh Harlequin is that the Welsh Harlequin 1 is a much smaller duck. It's about half the size of a silver appleyard, but it produces more eggs. So from the data that I've gotten, Welsh Harlequins can get anywhere from 250 to 320 eggs per year. Their size of their eggs is relatively large for the small size of the duck. You're getting anywhere from 75 to 85 gram size eggs, and you're getting a lot of them. So I really like this particular breed because it's the best bang for the buck. You have to spend the least amount of money on food to get the most amount of eggs back. And this particular breed is also very well known for having a great temperament. It's a very calm duck, very docile, is not flighty, and it's supposedly not particularly noisy. So if you've got neighbors that complain about your ducks quacking all the time, supposedly this is a good breed for you. Anyway, so that's the Welsh Harlequin. This is what I'm going to be growing. I have 8 eggs here. My incubator can only handle 7. So I'm going to look through these eggs, see if any of them are cracked. But that does give me the ability to be a little bit choicey about my eggs, so I can only use 7. So the next thing that I want to talk about is cleaning your eggs. So you're going to need to take your eggs and make sure you get them really clean with some nice warm water and some soap. So clean them down, scrub them up, get them as clean as you possibly can. And then you want to disinfect them. So you want to use some hydrogen peroxide. Is a great disinfectant to try to remove any source of bacteria on your eggs before you put them inside your incubator. Hydrogen peroxide also, from what I've read, helps the eggshell out by allowing it to absorb more oxygen, which is going to increase your hatching success rate. So a lot of people have indicated that rinsing your eggs with hydrogen peroxide is a great way to disinfect your eggs, but also increase your hatching rate. All right, so those are the materials that I'm going to be using to hatch my ducks. I'm going to go ahead and wash these eggs, and then we're going to put them in the incubator, and I'll be right back. So I've got the eggs washed. I basically wash them in warm water with soap. I use the nice soft bristle brush to get any dirt residue off the surface. The good news is that none of the eggs were cracked. So I can choose all 8 that I want to grow. So I was really impressed with their packaging, so I really like that. Here you can see a comparison of a quarter to the size of these eggs. Again, for the size of the bird that a Welsh Harlequin is, it lays some really, really impressively sized eggs. So I've been really impressed with that. They are bigger than golden 300s, but again, smaller than silver appleyards. So, but anyway, I am really impressed with the size of the egg. Now, before you actually put your egg in your incubator, you want to try to figure out how much turning the egg has to do to be able to go from to be able to flip from one end to the other. So the way that you do that is you put some kind of a mark on the egg. Here you can see that I have a plus and a 0 mark. I'm going to put this in the incubator, and I'm going to have it go through its turning, and I'm going to find out how many seconds this egg needs to be able to turn to go from this all the way to this. So I'll be back with that in a second. So there's no way that I found that I can manually turn the interval anytime that I want. So I can't just press a button and make the eggs turn. The least amount of time that I can set an interval at is at 15 minutes. What the instructions do give you is they basically give you a bunch of different sizes of eggs where you match your egg up with the size then in terms of diameter, and then you from that you can figure out what the interval is supposed to be. So my duck eggs basically match this 10-second interval. This is what they look like inside the incubator. You can see, first off, I have the pointy end out instead of the pointy end, and they just barely fit. So I'm actually glad that I didn't try to hatch silver apple yards with this incubator, because those eggs are bigger and I don't think that they're going to work well. But anyway, I am going to show you a video of this thing turning, where you're going to see this egg with a 0 hopefully turn and then end up on the plus side. So I'll be right back with that. While we're waiting, I did want to point out one thing. So this is the water reservoir. So basically, I'm not going to go really deeply into how to set the humidity on there, because the vendor has a great instruction video on how to use this. But I just wanted to point out that this is where you actually add the water to the actual incubator, meaning that you don't need to open up the incubator to add the water. You can just basically put it in here, and through capillary action it sucks the water out of this reservoir and it brings it into a reservoir in the center, which you can't really see very well, but in the center there's a reservoir for holding the water. So that was one of the really cool things about this particular incubator. All right, so we're back. The eggs should turn hopefully in the next 20 to 30 seconds. So bear with me while they do that. All right, we're back, and I've got some bad news and I've got some good news. The bad news is that it turns out that these eggs, even though the diameter of the eggs pretty much match what's in the instruction manual, they're just too big for this incubator, and that when the incubator attempts to roll them, they bump into each other and they block their ability to roll. So as I mentioned, Welsh Harlequin eggs tend to be anywhere from 75 to 85 grams. I didn't actually weigh these, but these are considered, I would say, mid-sized duck eggs. You can certainly get much bigger eggs. You can get smaller eggs. So the take-home message that I would have is that if you want to use this incubator and use the automatic turn function, you should make sure that the eggs that you're attempting to hatch are on the small side. So that's the bad news. The good news is that I have decided to continue to use this incubator because I have the eggs. I purchased the eggs, so I want to see if I can actually hatch the eggs. And so what I decided to do is to create a foam plate that the eggs can sit on, that I cut out basically of an exercise mat. I'll show you some pictures of that in this video. And so I cut the mat out to fit the diameter of the actual incubator, and I put some holes in there to allow the eggs to be able to rest easily, gently, and not roll around inside of the incubator. Okay, so the other benefit of having this foam mat inside there is that it also adds to the insulation factor of the incubator, so the eggs are probably getting better incubation, more consistent temperature, because you're getting some insulatory properties of this foam mat. The third thing that's really good about not using the turn wheel is that you actually get to have extra eggs that you can incubate inside this incubator. So instead of using 7, I can now actually incubate 8. So that's all. That's good. So, you know, the incubator still rests very comfortably on the mat. It closes. It makes a pretty good seal. So this is what I'm going to continue to do through the next 4 weeks, and hopefully this will work. Instead of being able to turn my eggs on the hour, which is what I wanted to be able to do, instead I'm going to default back to what people generally do, which is turning their eggs every 8 hours. So that's 3 times a day. As you can see with these eggs, I have a plus sign on one side and then a 0 on the other. And so I'm basically just going to, that's how I'm going to mark how I'm turning the eggs. Every 8 hours I'll go from plus to 0 and then 0 back to plus. So that's what we're going to do moving forward with this incubator. So I wanted to go over the settings that I'm going to be incubating my eggs with. There's a lot of this particular incubator has a really easy way to get to all the settings and change it and adjust it to what you want. And I wanted to show you what settings I'm using. So in order to get to the settings, you hold the minus and the plus down at the same time. Okay, and then you can basically scroll through the settings with the OK buttons, like an enter button, and then you can adjust the settings with the minus and the plus. So if we take a look at it, I've got my temperature set at 99.5 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to be incubating for 28 days. My turn mode is going to be off because I'm not turning my eggs. The turn interval really doesn't matter because you're not turning it, so this actually is a moot point. And the turn angle is also a moot point. Before it was at 10, but as I mentioned, because of the fact that this incubator, these eggs are too big for this incubator, the angle timer doesn't also make any difference. So the alarm high is set for 3.6 and the alarm low is set for 5.4 Fahrenheit. And the cooling is set for 30 minutes daily. And it starts at midnight, and basically it shuts the incubator down, allows the eggs to cool down, and then brings the temperature back down to, or back up to 99.5. So this is whether or not you want to do Fahrenheit or Celsius. I'm American, so I choose Fahrenheit, and then I hit save, and there we go. We're off and running. So these are the settings that I'm going to use. Most of these settings are your typical settings for ducks, 99.5, and 28 days of incubation are pretty standard for hatching ducks. So I'll come back. We're going to do a candle of the eggs at 3 days, which will be day 25, to see how these eggs are doing in terms of maturing, and I'll have a video for that. So I'll be back. See you in 3 days. In terms of verifying that the incubator is giving me the accurate readings, I went about going ahead and calibrating my sensor. You can always do that by calibrating the temperature by putting the sensor in some ice water and making sure that it hits 32 degrees, and then you can use one of these one-step calibration hygrometer kits to verify humidity. Okay, we're going to try some candeling today. We are at halfway through day 4, so we're a little late. Generally, you want to do this at day 3 and day 7. The materials that you need for candeling basically is you just need a flashlight that has a pretty good strong light so that it can shine through the egg and you can see what's going on inside the egg, which we have. I think that's about 300 lumens is what that light shoots out.
So it's pretty bright. All right, so let's open up our incubator. And what you want to do is grab an egg and you want to put it pointy side down on top of the light. Okay, and you're looking for the presence of veins, formation of veins, and you should see the development of an embryo, which you can see right there. Okay, so that's what you want to see as you move through your eggs. So let's try another one. Okay, once again, you see veins and you see the embryo. Let's try one more. Okay, there we go. Once again, veins and the embryo. So that's basically how you candle. You're looking for the early development of an embryo and vein formation in your yolk. Also, while you're doing this, you can take the opportunity to just make sure that the chamber is filled with water. Again, this is the chamber that you can fill on the outside when the incubator top is on, but that is the inner chamber that provides humidity inside the incubator. So that's candeling. We'll be back at day 7 just to make sure that everything is proceeding appropriately. See you then. All right, we're at day 7 and we're going to do some candeling. I also wanted to let you know that I did some testing with the sensor, and it turns out that when this is reading 99.6, it's really about 100.1, so it's reading about a half a degree higher on my sensor than this actual incubator. And for the humidity, it reads about 54%. So just so that you know, at least in my readings, the incubator seems to be running about a half a degree hotter than what it says, and if you are just filling up one chamber, you're getting about between 50 to 60%, or I'm getting 54% humidity. All right, so let's do some candeling, see what they look like. So we're going to turn our flashlight on. And take a look here. Alright, so turn it, see if you see anything. I can see a vein. Hold on a second. Okay, so we turn the light off now, so you can actually see the air pocket, and you can see a lot of veins, and the embryo's gotten a lot bigger. Let's try another one. So when you put it on the light, put it back on like that. That was good. Wow, there's a big old embryo. Let's zoom in. I'm also going to show you guys a link to a video of the embryo actually growing in time lapse. I think it's a pretty interesting video. So a lot of activity going on there. Let's try another one. A lot of activity going on there. Look at that. Fabulous. Okay, we're also, the other thing that I wanted to report is that I haven't really been noticing that the incubator has been cooling the eggs. It's supposed to cool them 30 minutes every day, and from the readings that I'm getting, I'm not really seeing that. I spoke to the person who sold me the eggs, and they said if you cool it at day 7 for 30 minutes, you're fine. So we're going to leave them out for 30 minutes today, out of the incubator, let them cool down a little bit, and then we'll put them back on again. But that's what we're doing on day 7, is some candeling and some cooling. We'll be back at day 21 to show you lockdown.
All right, it is lockdown day, which means it's 2 days until the eggs are about to hatch. And I thought I'd shoot a quick video to let you guys know the steps you should take on lockdown day, and then what you should be doing to prepare for the ducklings between lockdown day and hatch day. And then finally, what to talk about when the ducks hatch, what to expect. So most incubators come with turn wheels. This incubator does come with a turn wheel, but as I mentioned earlier in my video, the turn wheel did not allow my eggs to turn. It's possible that the reason that occurred is because my eggs were too big for the incubator. It's also possible that I've got a dud of an incubator. I don't know. However, because of the fact that my eggs weren't turning, what I did was I removed the turn wheel and I put in this foam plate. And the reason that I did that is that basically these little cutouts that I put all over the plate allowed me to sit the egg into the incubator while I was manually turning them and not move. So it provided a nice steady place for the eggs to lay. It also provided extra insulation to the incubation, the incubation chamber. And as I mentioned earlier, I did turn my eggs 3 times a day. It's suggested that you do that 2 or 3 times a day if you can. If you've got an incubator that actually turns your egg, it's great to do it, every hour if you can do that. But I did it every 8 hours. So the times that I did it was 8 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then midnight. So those were the 3 8-hour settings that I did. Okay, so the first thing I did was I removed the mat and I put the eggs right on the base. Okay, so they are now ready for hatching. The next thing I did was I increased the humidity, and with this particular incubator, you can add extra water here to the reservoir container. And if you add enough of it, what will happen is there's basically the reservoir that's inside the incubator is cut into 2 different sections. For a vast period of time during your incubation, you only want to have one of those chambers filled. But when you get to your lockdown day, which is 2 days before hatching, you want both of those chambers to fill. So I basically added enough water to that reservoir so that both my chambers would fill. And when I did that, what I was seeing in terms of humidity with this incubator was when I had half of the chamber filled, I got about anywhere from 50 to 55% humidity. And then when I had both the chambers filled, it went up to about 75 to 77% humidity. So that's what I'm seeing with this particular incubator right now. So in terms of temperature, you generally want to keep your temperature the same, which is 99.6 degrees Fahrenheit. I've read in other places where some people will drop the humidity down by 1 degree Fahrenheit, but I'm going to keep mine at 99.6. Now, in terms of working with the eggs and with the incubator during your 2-day lock day period, the reason it's called lockdown day is because you do not open up your incubator at all during those 2 days. The reason that you don't want to do that is because you want that humidity to stay in your incubator, because what it will do is it will hydrate the eggs and make it a lot easier for your ducks to hatch. A great deal of mortality occurs during duck hatching, during the actual hatching process, where you will get ducks that have fully matured in the egg but are unable to crack through the egg part, and then they lose oxygen and they die. So that is a reason why you do not ever want to open up your incubator after those 2 days. Just keep it closed. So that's about it. Those are the steps that you take. You remove your turn wheel, or in my case, your foam insert. You increase your humidity, and then you just leave it alone. That's pretty much what you do on lockdown day. I'm going to pause the video now, and then I'm going to show you things that you can do between lockdown day and hatch day, which is the 28th day, to prepare for the ducklings. So I'll be back in a second with that. So let's talk about your brood chamber. It is absolutely imperative that you get this thing set up way before the ducks show up, and I'll explain why that is a little bit later. But you want to make sure that you've got all the materials ready and your brood chamber set up so when the ducklings are ready to come out of the incubator, they have a nice warm spot to go right into. So let's talk about some of the things and materials that you should probably acquire in order to get a good brood chamber. Now, I've seen some people use just cardboard boxes, which you can do to keep your ducklings in. The problem with cardboard boxes is that ducklings tend to be really messy, especially with the water. And what will happen is that your cardboard will get wet, it'll get soggy, and then you'll start getting mold and potentially bacterial growth inside your growth chamber. So that's a really bad idea in terms of a good source of a container for a brood chamber. So I like to use plastic. This is just a Sterilite container that I use. You generally want to use something that is at least 6 inches tall, and this is at least double that. Might be 14 to 16 inches tall. So this container should last me a good while in terms of their development while they're in the brood chamber. The next thing you want to do is you want to have a material that they can walk on and sleep on, and it also a material that is chemical free and that's capable of absorbing the odors of the urine and the poop and the water that's going to go everywhere. And so this is pine shavings. You can get this at your feed store. I got this at Southern States. I'll show you a picture of the material that I'm using. But you want to get a good healthy amount of it. So you see here I've got a big bale of it here. And you're going to be changing this out probably, I'd say every other day, if not every 3 days. You're going to be taking this out and putting in new stuff. And I like to use this a lot because I can take it and I can put it in my garden. So I'll take it out of the coop. I'll put them in another box while I'm doing it. I'll clean their brood out, their brood chamber out with all this material and put fresh stuff in and disinfect it. But that's another material that you're going to need for your brood chamber. And then finally, you're going to want to have a heat source. So here I have a hanging heat lamp here. And it's basically just a lamp with a heat bulb in there. You can get different wattage of bulbs, and more wattage of bulbs will give you more heat. When the ducks come out of the incubator, they're used to a temperature in the mid-90s. So what you want to do is you want to set your brood chamber up to be in the mid-90s, and you want to keep it that way for the first week while they're in there. So it's really also important for you to have a really good idea of what the temperature is like inside your brood chamber. So for instance, in this particular one, I have a kind of one of these heat guns here, surface heat guns. And, I can basically kind of just put it around the chamber, and you want it to be, in the mid 90s. So we're almost there. I did just set this up so the bedding is actually getting warm right now, but this is around what you want to do. And the way that the heat progresses is every week that your ducklings are in the brood chamber, you want to increase the temperature, decrease the temperature by 5 degrees. So the second week you want it to be 90 degrees, the third week you want it to be 85, and so forth. Now, a really easy way to also make sure that your brood chamber is the right temperature is just watch what the ducklings do. So if you're noticing that your ducklings are all kind of balling up to try to keep each other warm, it means that your brood chamber is too cold. If you notice that your ducklings are keeping completely away from the light and they seem to be panting, that means that your brood chamber is too warm. So what you really want to see is them to kind of spread out inside the brood chamber and feel comfortable around the heat source, and just kind of watch them, and they'll tell you whether or not the temperature in there is appropriate. So just kind of watch them with that. The reason I've seen people have like a clamp for their light, where they're basically they'll put a board across the incubator and they'll clamp their light to it. I like the hanging technique, because what it allows me to do is to increase the height of the lamp, which decreases the temperature inside the brood chamber. So as the time progresses, I can decrease the light by just increasing the height, decrease the temperature by just increasing the height of the lamp. All right, so that's the chamber itself. Let's talk about food and water. Okay, so you want to make sure that you have a good amount of water for your ducks at all times. You want to change out the water every single day. And I've seen some people actually will supplement their water with something called raw apple cider vinegar. Generally, the ratio is about a teaspoon to a gallon, and you want to make sure that it's raw and not just apple cider vinegar. Okay, because apple cider vinegar, they process the apple cider and they remove all the good things that the apple cider has in it. So you want to make sure you get raw apple cider vinegar. And many people believe that by kind of spiking some raw apple cider vinegar into your water, it boosts their immune system. Okay. Now the water container, there's lots of different kinds that you can choose, stuff that you can buy online or at your pet stores. This is something that I've seen a lot of people do. Well, they'll take like a milk jug and they'll put a hole in it. And so this is like a juice container that I have. And so what I did was I put holes on the side so that it's kind of low for when the ducklings when they first come out. They should be able to reach that no problem. And then what I can do is I can turn it that way, okay, and make it a little bit higher. And then as they get older and older and older, I can find different larger containers for them to drink out of. But however you do it, you want to try to contain the water as much as possible, because this is the source where most of the mess comes from with ducklings, is the water. So if you can contain your water, and there's lots of videos online where people have different really creative ways of doing that, it's going to make your brood chamber a lot cleaner. Okay. The next thing is your food. So there's also lots of different food containers that you can buy online. I'm using this plastic egg crate. I'm just going to put the feed right in there. And, you know, one of the tricks with the feed is if you wet the feed a little bit and kind of make it so that it's not kind of a powdery mess or a powdery consistency, but you can kind of cake it in your hand a little bit. That'll reduce the amount of loss of food that goes everywhere when they're eating. Okay. You also want to figure out a way to try to figure out how to keep this food so they don't knock it over. Okay. Now the food that you should get is specialized food for young chicks and ducklings. They call it starter grower here. You can get this again at a pet store. I got this at Southern States, which is where I get all my stuff from. But this is special food that has special supplements in that the ducklings need when they're really, really young. So you want to make sure that you get some of this. Another supplement that's some of these feeds have in them is something called niacin, which is also a really important vitamin that ducklings need when they're growing. This particular type of feed has it already in there. But if your feed doesn't, then what you're going to need to do is to buy niacin, and some people will crumble it into the food, and some people will get like liquid niacin and then they'll just put it right in their water. But you do want to make sure that they have a source of niacin. The other thing is that the way that ducks digest their food is they use grit. So one of the other things that is good to do is to put some kind of grit in their feed. If your food doesn't already have it, you can get like sand and mix your food with a little bit of sand, so they can get that grit inside their upper stomach that helps them digest their food easier. Okay, so those are the things you're going to need: water, you're going to need food, you're going to need a nice warm brood chamber, and you're going to need to be able to figure out a way to give them food and water. Now, the amount of feed that you give them, you can leave the feed out all the time if you want, or if you want, I've also heard that you can feed them 3 times a day. And so basically, every 8 hours, put their food out, let them eat as much as they can in 15 minutes, and then take the food away from them. That's another thing that you can do if you're interested. Okay, so that's the food and the water. The last thing I wanted to talk about is you should also get yourself educated on what to expect with raising ducklings and raising ducks themselves. So I would strongly suggest that you watch as many videos on YouTube as you possibly can to see how people keep their ducks in their duck yards and their coops, and also get yourself some reference materials on ducklings. A really good reference material is this one. I use this all the time. This is Story's Guide to Raising Ducks by Dave Holderreed. This is an excellent reference, gives you everything that you could possibly ever want. This is the second edition. All the information that you could possibly want about ducks is inside there. And I suggest that you read that, because some of the things that you can find on the internet may not be correct. So it's always a good idea to have a foundational knowledge from a reputable reference to make sure that you understand what you're doing and what you can expect in terms of taking care of ducks. So that's it. I'm going to be back with some video of the ducks actually hatching in the brood in a couple days. So I'll see you guys then. So let's talk about when it's appropriate to hatch ducklings. Because it's a really, really bad idea to go into the process of hatching ducklings when you're not in the right season to do it. The reason for that is that when ducklings are born, they have no feathers. And because of the fact that they have no feathers, you have to provide an alternate heat source for them to keep them warm. After a month, 5 to 7 weeks or so, the ducklings will have feathers and you can take them outside. But what happens if you've hatched your ducklings in late fall? You can't send them outside. They're immature ducks and they won't be able to handle the winter if you have winter where you are. So it's important for you to kind of synchronize when you're going to hatch your duck eggs with the seasons in the area that you live. So for instance, right now it's late April and my ducks are going to be born in a couple days, and 5 to 7 weeks from now puts it around mid-June. Around mid-June it should be 70 to 80 degrees or hotter outside, and it should be above 50 degrees at night, which is what you want to see in terms of keeping your young ducks outside. If you don't synchronize when you're going to hatch your ducks, it means that you have to keep your ducks and large adult ducks inside your house until it is appropriate for you to take them outside. And you believe me, you do not want adult ducks inside your house. It's just a giant mess. So just remember that when it comes to trying to figure out when it's appropriate to hatch ducklings, that you think about where you live and what the temperature is going to be like outside. Figure out when it's going to be above 50 degrees at night and then go back 2 months from that, because it's going to take a month for you to hatch your ducks and it's going to take another month for them to get their feathers in and be ready to go outside. So in terms of where you keep your brood chamber, it's important to keep it in an area of your house where it's not a lot of drafts, where you have kind of consistent temperature. You want to try to find an area of your house where you're getting about 70 to 75 degrees in your house. And again, these ducks are really, really, really susceptible to cold weather because they don't have any feathers. So you just kind of want to remember that wherever you keep your brood chamber, you don't want to keep it next to a window or next to a door that's constantly being open and closed, because you'll create a lot of drafty conditions. So just think about that in terms of where you're going to keep your brood chamber. The other thing I wanted to talk about is letting your ducklings take a bath or swim. And this is one of the things that I think everybody thinks is adorable with ducklings, is watching them play in the water. And when these ducklings come out of the eggs, they're going to look super cute. But again, they have no feathers. and they tire out really easily. And from what I've read, a really good suggestion is you do not want to allow your ducks to swim in a body of water until they get about 2 weeks old. Also, if you're going to create an area for them to swim in, you want to have that area placed where that they can go rest. So there's some kind of ramp that allows them to get out of the water and rest and then jump back in the water again. You don't ever want to leave your ducks alone for long periods of time in the water, because there's been lots of stories of people allowing their ducklings to swim and coming back and finding that their ducklings were had drowned. And also, wherever you let them swim and wherever you keep your brood chamber protected against any animals that you may have in or outside your house, and also make sure that you do a really good job discussing with your children how to handle ducklings. The first time that I had a brood of ducklings, my daughter, who I think was 5 at the time, went downstairs and handled a duck and injured the duck really bad. So you want to make sure that you I'm all about children learning about animals and nursing animals and all that, but make sure that they have some parental oversight during that time. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about what you can expect during the hatching process. I will shoot some video of the ducks actually hatching, but before I go into that, I just kind of wanted to go over some of the things that you should expect. Now, the first thing that will happen during the lockdown period is you'll get this thing called pipping, which is basically the ducklings have this little kind of solid piece at the end of their beak that they use to start to break the egg open. And you can actually see with this egg right here, see that little crack right there? That is early pipping. Some other things that you'll hear if you're really quiet is you'll actually hear them peeping. Do you hear that? So they're in there, they're peeping away, and they're getting ready to come out. So when they hatch, they typically, when they start cracking the egg open, they'll take anywhere from 12 to 24 hours to actually get out of the egg. And sometimes it's a really long process. So you should kind of be prepared for that. Once they hatch, you want to keep them in the incubator for at least 12 hours. And the reason for that is the incubator is nice and warm. And what it will do is when they come out, they'll be very wet. They'll be very tired. And they need basically a period to rebound and to dry off. So you want them to kind of be in the incubator in a nice warm setting and to dry off. And that's where you start seeing those cute little fluffy ducklings, which everybody's used to. When you see that, then you can take the duckling out and put them into your brood chamber. Now, in terms of feeding them, there's actually a little bit of yolk remaining in the egg that they are absorbing, and they have pretty full bellies right now when they get out of the egg. There's another pip right there. You see that right there? Yep. So don't be concerned about them being hungry right after they hatch. They've got enough food in their bellies to last a good 1 to 2 days. So don't remove them from the chamber because you think they're hungry. Only remove them from the chamber if they're dry. And as I mentioned before, when you open up the chamber, you want to do it very quickly because you're releasing all that humidity and you're potentially making it more difficult for the other ducklings to hatch. Now, there are some situations where ducklings have a hard time breaking out of the egg. And basically what they're going to start doing is cracking the egg 360 degrees around the egg. And if you notice that a duck is almost out of the egg and they can't quite make it out, some people do open up the egg and just kind of help crack it open for them so that they can escape. But if you're going to do that, You need to be really careful with that because you can injure them when you do that. And if while you're cracking open the egg, if you start to see some blood, you want to stop and let them try to get out of the egg themselves. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of mortality occurs during the hatching process. So right now, all of these eggs are developing. All 8 of my eggs have developed, which is pretty shocking. But you know, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these eggs, or some of these ducklings are unable to hatch. So as they say, you don't count your eggs until they hatch, and we'll have to see how that goes. So those are some of the things that you should be thinking about, or should be knowledgeable about when your ducklings start to hatch from their eggs.
So it's day 27, and we got ourselves a duckling. So this little guy decided to come out a day early, and she's pretty exhausted. Now, according to the literature, you can actually tell a female from a male by looking at their beak, and females will have lighter beaks colors than the males, and they'll have like a black dot at the end of their beak, so you can see her little black dot there. So anyway, we're a day early. We're hoping the other eggs hatch later today and tomorrow.
So the end result is we got 7 out of 8 of the eggs to hatch, which I think is a pretty good hatch rate. That's almost 90%. So these are Welsh Harlequin ducklings again. Really interesting thing about them is that you can actually tell the difference between a male and a female by the color of their beak. So the ducks with dark beaks are males, and the ducks with lighter beaks, and they usually have a spot at the end, like these 2 ducks right here that are drinking. These are females, and there's supposedly sexing them through their beak color is about 75% effective. So not 100%, but pretty close. We were able to get 4 females and 3 males out of our 7 ducks. Anyway, I thought the hatch was pretty successful, and I'm really looking forward to taking care of these ducklings and getting them out into the duck yard.